and the omnibus. So I was forced into the Archers when I was a child. And look, it's come back to bite me later on.
I'm awash with the stuff.
The Archers is the world's longest-running radio show, with more than 15,000 episodes broadcast. Despite being a rural flavour show, The Archers is recorded in the heart of the UK's second-largest city.
Welcome to The Deep Dive, where we take your sources and really unpack the most interesting insights.
That's right.
Today we're diving into some excerpts from an audio source, basically snippets of conversations.
Yeah, capturing these moments of planning, a bit of worry, and some potentially difficult news.
And our mission for this deep dive, really, is to explore those layers of stress, maybe anxiety, that often lie just beneath the surface.
Even in what look like, ordinary events, we'll look at how personal history, maybe some deep-seated anxieties, can really shape how we see things, how we react to things happening right now.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how that works? So we've pulled three main threads from these conversations for you. There are preparations for a community open farm Sunday. Then there's a chat after a child's health checkup. And also that very relatable stress around planning a surprise birthday party.
Right. Should be interesting to see the dynamics. You might find some familiar stresses playing out in maybe unexpected ways.
Okay, let's get into it, starting with the Open Farm Sunday preparations.
Yeah, you hear all the details being planned out, don't you? Like the carving talk at 11, the Herefords talk at 12.
Ben doing the sheep display with Bess at 2, out on Badger's Bank, was it?
That's it. And Pip's on milking duty with small groups. Rosie and Leonard have the animal sticker table. Rosie's apparently very excited making lists.
Sounds lovely, like a proper fun farm day. But almost immediately you pick up on this heightened anxiety from David.
Definitely. He starts talking about hiring walkie-talkies for Rex, Ed, and Will.
As an extra precaution, he says. Which, it feels a bit much when they all have phones, right?
It does seem like overkill, and that concern, it escalates pretty quickly. He suggests a bag check at the gate.
Wow. And Ruth immediately pushes back on that, calls it over the top.
Yeah, you can sort of hear Ruth noticing he's not quite himself, not buzzing with excitement like he normally would be for this kind of thing.
She even teases him a bit, suggests he's getting old.
Which he pushes back on, but, playfully. But she clearly senses something deeper is up.
And then we get to the heart of it. David confesses what's really driving this worry.
Yeah, he's having flashbacks, waking him up at night.
Flashbacks to that awful protest.
In the meeting room in the abattoir, he describes it as violent and horrible.
So you see, the trauma from that past event, it isn't just sitting in the past.
No, it's actively bleeding into, right now, into his perception of this farm day. He even admits he's inventing scenarios of things happening here on an open farm Sunday.
He's basically projecting the fear and chaos from the protest onto this, totally different public event.
And he seems to feel some kind of, personal failure about the protest, like seeing the others, Rex, Ed, Will, as maybe braver.
Because they're farmers like him, not professional security. He says he wishes he'd been more proactive back then.
Which is such a contrast to Ruth's view, isn't it? She thought he kept everyone calm, that he was fantastic.
Totally different perspectives. And his mind is clearly casting about, trying to find a way to handle this fear, even if the logic is a bit shaky.
Right, that's where the radio story comes in. About survival.
Yeah, taking action in an emergency, an avalanche, a plane hijack, being better than being passive.
And Ruth, quite reasonably, points out the disconnect there. You weren't in an avalanche, and you weren't on a plane.
Exactly. But for him, it's clearly about that feeling of helplessness he must have felt then.
And this desperate need to feel proactive now, to feel in control this time.
And his core fear, the one driving all this for the farm day, becomes really clear.
What if something happens to one of those kids?
Yeah. What if they get hurt because someone turns up with bad intentions? It's that ultimate vulnerability, isn't it? Tied right back to his feeling of powerlessness during the protest.
But Ruth tries to counter that fear. She brings him back to the event's actual purpose, its value.
Reminding him it's to educate people, that canceling would be like own goal.
And she calls it one of the most life-affirming experiences, even an amazing ad for the business. She's trying to anchor him back in the positive reality of this event.
Pulling him away from the negative projection from his past. But the tension is palpable. David says he just can't stop thinking these thoughts.
And Ruth, she gets it. She doesn't want him torturing yourself. She acknowledges the trauma they all went through.
But she also feels that letting the fear win, canceling the whole thing, just seems so wrong.
And then she says that crucial thing, "You are my priority, not Open Farm Sunday."
Which really shows that conflict, doesn't it? Wanting to support someone through their trauma, but also not wanting that trauma to dictate everything they do now.
There's even that little moment, it's almost sad, where David wishes for something a bit daft.
Like that confusing story about the bridge farmer running a goat to Jim Connor.
Yeah, it sounded hilarious, apparently, but it just highlights that yearning for something light, something absurd, just to escape the weight of all this anxiety.
It really makes you wonder, how much is David actually seeing the Open Farm Sunday for what it is?
And how much is he just seeing the abattoir protest overlaid onto it?
His mind seems so preoccupied, even when they briefly touch on the sustainable farming talk.
Well, yeah, suggesting Josh, then David questioning his, public speaking skills.
Suggesting Pip instead, but she's doing milking. David even considering doing the milking himself.
It just underscores how these anxious thoughts are just consuming his headspace.
It's such a clear example, isn't it, of how past trauma can act like a filter.
It's distorting the present reality, driving these anxious, sometimes sort of disproportionate reactions.
Okay, let's shift gears to a different kind of anxiety, maybe just as intense though. A conversation after a child's health checkup.
Right. We find Alice and Chris with their daughter Martha talking to a doctor named Azra. They needed Ben to watch Martha for a minute so they could talk properly.
And the initial concern, it came from Martha's nursery.
Yeah, they noticed she was having some trouble concentrating. And Chris points out that Alice had been quite persistent asking the nursery about it.
Suggesting this has been worrying Alice for a while, maybe tapping into other anxiety she already had.
Could be. So Dr. Azra gives her assessment quite carefully. She says there's nothing obviously delayed about Martha's development.
Okay, that sounds reassuring on the surface.
Well, yes and no. She also mentions Martha might be a little young for her age, notes that development is a spectrum,
Right.
and acknowledges that being born 6 weeks premature could have an impact. And crucially, she does agree with the nursery about the concentration issues.
So not entirely clear-cut. How do Alice and Chris react?
Differently. Chris makes a joke about his own focus issues, maybe trying to lighten things up, or maybe that's just how he copes.
But Alice.
Alice is clearly very distressed. You hear her say she's very worried, just so desperate for her to be okay.
And that level of worry, her concern, it directly leads to the next step, doesn't it?
It does. Dr. Azra explicitly says she's referring Martha to a specialist pediatrician because Alice is so concerned.
Wow. So the referral itself is partly driven by the parents' anxiety level.
Seems like it. And that referral, while maybe the right medical step, immediately throws them into this period of uncertainty, which is just agonizing for a parent.
Absolutely. And the conversation after the checkup between Alice and Chris, that's incredibly telling.
It really is. It shows how anxiety and maybe past experiences can completely filter the information we hear. Chris initially heard Azra as being quite reassuring.
Focusing on there wasn't anything seriously wrong part.
Exactly. But Alice heard something very different. Something filtered through her own deep-seated guilt, likely connected to her past drinking.
How so? What did she hear?
She corrects Chris. She says what she heard was Azra saying that even if something was wrong and she connects this possibility to her past actions, it might not be diagnosable for at least another couple of years.
Oh, wow. So her interpretation is completely colored by this fear that she might be responsible, that she might have hurt Martha somehow.
And she says it almost directly. It's heartbreaking. She reveals what she really needed to hear from the doctor.
Which
I wanted Azra to say, "You didn't hurt Martha. It's all right. Everything's all right."
Oh, man. So this wasn't just about Martha's development for her. It was about seeking validation, maybe absolution, tied to her own history.
Precisely. And the impact of this uncertainty, this waiting game for the specialist, it hits hard. The referral will probably take a while, could be months.
And Alice says she feels sick until it does. Describes her heart sank when the referral was mentioned.
And this intense anxiety then creates problems even in their communication between Alice and Chris.
How so?
Well, Chris feels the whole visit was pretty inconclusive, partly because of that ambiguity. But Alice says it was really great. He was there because she was so stressed, she could hardly hear what Azrael was actually saying.
Which understandably leads to some frustration from Chris.
Yeah, he asks, what's the point in me being there then if she couldn't even hear the doctor? And Alice apologizes. She knows she's being frustrating.
It's just a really raw moment, isn't it? showing how her stress isn't just internal. It's affecting her ability to process vital information and even connect properly with her partner who's trying to support her.
A powerful illustration, yeah. How our internal state can just create this barrier blocking information, even if it's meant to be reassuring.
Okay, let's shift gears one more time to a third scenario. Maybe less intense trauma here, but definitely relatable stress, planning a surprise 40th birthday party.
Right. For Harrison, we meet Fallon, and she is right in the thick of it. The party's for the very next day, Tuesday, his actual birthday. And it's an early start, 6:45 p.m.
The pressure is definitely on,
Yeah.
and Fallon is clearly feeling it. People are canceling.
Yeah, she's worried it's going to be a non-event. And Harrison's schedule is tight, only 2 days off before he has to drive back Thursday, so this Tuesday night has to work.
Adds to the pressure. She's obviously put thought into it, though, asking people to bring specific things.
Like Alice's amazing salads, she even specifies the caramelized salmon, kale, and pomegranate one.
Sounds good.
And Chris's playlist, she's delegating, trying to manage it all.
And then she adds another request for Alice about that ping pong balls and cups game.
Yeah, asks if Alice still has it and can bring it along. It feels a bit like she's grasping for activities, you know? Anything to make sure it feels like a proper party, to fight off that anxiety about the atmosphere falling flat.
Totally. Alice and Chris reassure her, though, they definitely will be there. They just need to sort of babysit her.
But Fallon's specific anxiety then comes out. She verbalizes it. She's worried about that weird thing where there's too many people to fit around a table for dinner, but not enough people to feel like a gathering.
Oh, that limbo stage of party size. So
Yeah.
relatable when you're hosting.
Exactly. She admits she's overthinking it. That pressure to create the perfect social vibe, the fear of it just being awkward,
Yeah, definitely been there.
and her stress leads to a slightly awkward moment. She makes a joke.
The worst case scenario, we can all just get really drunk.
That's the one. Which, knowing what we just heard about Alice's history and her current worries, it lands a bit clumsily.
Yeah, you can almost hear Fallon realize it as soon as she says it.
Totally. She immediately backtracks, apologizes to Alice. I know you won't get drunk, I'm sorry. It shows how her own stress is making her maybe less careful, less sensitive than she normally would be.
But Alice handles it well, seems supportive, brushes off the apology, reassures Fallon she'll find the game, tells her they'll have a lovely time.
Yeah, it just highlights how even with these, seemingly lighter stressors like planning a party, anxiety can really ramp up the overthinking, the overplanning.
And sometimes lead to those awkward little slip-ups, especially when you're juggling expectations and trying to keep everyone happy.
So, looking at these different moments all together, what does it all point to?
Well, I think these sources really show how planning things, navigating difficult situations, even just trying to celebrate something, it can all get tangled up with our own personal anxieties or past traumas, maybe social pressures too.
We saw David's fear about safety at the farm, directly linked back to that violent protest he experienced.
Yeah. And Alice's deep worry about Martha's health, completely intertwined with her own history, her guilt.
And even Fallon's stress about Harrison's party turning outright, exposing those really common social anxieties and leading to that awkwardness under pressure.
It just drives home how much our internal landscape, the fears we carry, the experiences that shaped us, even just our mood on the day, how much that influences the way we see and handle everything happening around us.
It's never just about the external event itself, is it? It's always filtered through everything we're holding inside.
Exactly. Which I guess raises a pretty important question for you, the listener, to think about pulling these threads together.
Thinking about David's instinct, driven by past trauma, to take action, maybe even over-the-top action.
Compared with Alice's struggle, because of her stress and guilt, to even hear potentially reassuring information from a doctor.
How does your own personal baggage, or maybe just your current level of anxiety, how does it filter the reality you experience?
Yeah. How does it impact your ability to act? Or maybe just your ability to hear what others are actually telling you, to see a situation clearly.
Something to mull over, definitely.
So, what are you doing now?
Just getting ready for the next episode. Just
And,
moving mics around.
So, what do you do?
I do the spot effects on the arches.
Are you what we call Foley then?
Kind of. Yep.
Okay. And these are all part of the paraphernalia of production.
Yep. That's the ball bar.
This one.
Ladies so wanted to be in their own place when they baby came. due in 2 months. Not much chance of that now. I mean, it would have been a stretch for him for him actually going, but I just wish there was something practical I could do to help him go along. I think The Archers has had this immense popularity over the years, basically because it has always very accurately reflected the reality of life and living in a rural community, whatever